Welcome to Unschooling, exploring learning beyond the classroom. My name is Gina Riley, and I am a professor at CUNY Hunter College. I will say that we've come a long way. Interest in home learning has doubled during the pandemic. 10% of American families are choosing to homeschool this year, up from 5% 1 year ago. Interest in home education and unschooling is increasing day by day. And of course, we'll see if this number changes after the pandemic. But one thing is clear. More families are pursuing educational alternatives than ever before. You have to understand that in my career, I teach public school teachers, and specifically New York City public school teachers. I run a program in adolescent special education. I love and support public schooling, but I also have spent my life researching unschooling and homeschooling, and know that homeschooling and unschooling is a choice, just like public, private, or homeschooling. Unschooling is often considered to be a branch of homeschooling. While other homeschoolers do school at home and follow a set curriculum, unschoolers learn primarily through everyday life experiences. And these are usually experiences that they choose and that therefore automatically match their abilities, interests, and learning styles. In unschooling, there are no grades or tests, and assessment is authentic and intrinsic. Note that approximately 20% of homeschoolers consider themselves unschoolers, and that number is growing every day. Most unschoolers will start off as homeschoolers and then loosen up curriculum once they realize that, my gosh, their kids are learning, they're growing, and they don't really need any sort of extrinsic anything to do so. In terms of historical perspective, unschooling has been around forever. Hunter-gatherer cultures learn through cultural transmission. Rousseau, the philosopher, really spoke in his work Emily about learning from the natural world and education as natural, simple, and unstructured. The educational great John Dewey always focused on individuals becoming engaged democratic citizens and said, I believe that education, therefore, is a process of living and not preparation for future living. A lot of us know A.S. Neal, founder of Summerhill, which is a boarding school in England that focuses on freedom and autonomy for all students. And then, of course, there was Ivan Illich, the author of Deschooling Society, which was a huge critique of compulsory education and really big in the 1970s. You have John Holt, author of How Children Fail and How Children Learn, and he's often known as the father of unschooling. He is the person that first initially said, children can and will learn at home, and they can learn naturally and organically. John Taylor Gatto, New York City Teacher of the Year, a school teacher for 30 years. After that 30 years, felt that, there's another way to do this, and became this huge homeschooling advocate, writing things like Dumbing Us Down and the Underground History of American Education. And of course, most of us who study unschooling and homeschooling and self-directed learning know the work of Peter Gray, evolutionary psychologist, my colleague, and the author of Free to Learn. Know that homeschooling has deep roots in theory as well. My whole life, I've been focused on studying the link between intrinsic motivation and home education, and specifically cognitive evaluation theory, which is a sub-theory of self-determination theory, focusing on facilitating intrinsic motivation using competence, autonomy, and relatedness. Everything we do in unschooling is really about that. Also, Howard Gardner, Harvard professor, his theory of multiple intelligences come in here too, as unschoolers use all of their intelligences and strengths to live and learn within the world. Of course, we know that unschooling is grown. Once the realm of liberal white two-parent families, the face of unschooling has changed dramatically. There's an increase especially seen in Black and Hispanic families due to schools not meeting the needs of their children, as well as the predominantly Eurocentric curriculum taught in most schools. I'm highly recommending Raising Free People, a new book by Akilah Richards, which is going to be amazing, talking about unschooling and liberation and healing work within the Black community. There's been an increase in students of lower SES in terms of unschooling, as well as an increase of students with special needs who unschool. There's also been, in something I write about, an increase in students who identify as LGBTQ. We know from research, specifically research that myself and Peter Gray has done, that most individuals come to unschooling after a period of homeschooling and previously private or public schooling if they did go to school. We know that there's a lot of deschooling that has to go on, especially about or on the part of the parent or guardian when we talk about unschooling. Because it's hard to let go of our culturally ingrained educational philosophy. It's hard to let go of the fact that school is more than just, grades and tests. So we have to do a lot of work there. People come to unschooling through natural family living or books or conferences, speakers and TED Talks, conferences just like the one you're attending right now. Sir Ken Robinson, if you came to this conference and you heard his talk, my gosh, we lost an amazing, amazing educational advocate and someone who was really such a proponent of self-directed learning. People also come to unschooling as a result of knowing other unschooling families. The largest criticism of unschooling comes from the notion that unschooled students will have gaps in their education as a result of not having a well-rounded curriculum-based education. And my answer to that is always, just as schooled kids have gaps in learning, unschooled kids will too. Izzy Dismaris always says, I used to worry that I had gaps when compared to my schooled peers. But the older I got, the more apparent it became just how different everyone's skills were. I was better at some things than some people, and other people were better at other things. I knew more about some subjects and less about others, just like all of my friends, whether schooled or homeschooled or unschooled. People come into this world with different strengths. And the whole point is to use those strengths. And the most amazing place that's seen is within the unschooling arena. In terms of the challenges of unschooling, when Peter Gray and I did a large-scale study of unschooling families, we had 232 families participate. We really thought about the challenges. We wanted to ask questions about benefits and we wanted to know more about unschooling, but we also wanted to know what the challenges were. 43.5% of respondents said the feeling of social stigma was a huge challenge. The stigma of the choice, the stigma of making a choice that was different. I guarantee in 2020, if you ask the same question, the stigma might not be as much because of the pandemic and the fact that most people now understand at least a little bit what home education or even what unschooling looks like. 42% said, the deschooling was a real issue, the getting rid of culturally ingrained thoughts regarding the nature of teaching and learning. Families mentioned time, career, and income effects. Families also mentioned legal issues surrounding unschooling. In terms of the benefits, I can't say enough about these benefits. 57.3% of families mentioned increased student learning. 52% talked about the social emotional benefits of unschooling and how it was a very healing environment for either their kids who just struggled in educational spots or for kids who had special needs already. 57% mentioned an increase in positive family relationships, and 36% reported family and individual freedom of schedule. Lots of unschooling families we talked to really found that freedom of schedule very, very important. They had time to travel. They had time to go to museums and historic places, and they wouldn't have to worry about the weekend lines. After we asked the families 2 years later, we went ahead and we wanted to really hear about the unschooling experience from grown unschoolers. And so we did studies, 2 of which were published in the journal Other Education, about unschooler outcomes. And we found that unschooled adults really had great outcomes. That 69% reported a good social life and specifically mentioned age mixing benefits. They had friends of all different ages, not friends of just one age and grade. 77% mentioned time to pursue one's interests as a great benefit of unschooling. 75% mentioned freedom and independence that came from having your own schedule. And 75% also mentioned increased self-direction and intrinsic motivation. People also mentioned increased learning and a smoother transition to adulthood. And 37% reported no disadvantages. We did have individuals, 3 out of 75 to be exact, that said, unschooling wasn't such a great experience for them. In all cases, their parents had mental health issues. However, 2 out of 3 of those individuals also said they could see the benefits, in a different space, in another family space. In terms of adult outcomes, we asked about higher education and careers, and 83% of respondents pursued higher education, showing that college really isn't, a barrier, right? There are so many different ways to get into college. There's not just one way. You don't always have to have a transcript. You don't always have to have those SAT or ACT scores. All our adult unschoolers were gainfully employed, except for those who were full-time students or caregivers for young children. And 78% were completely financially independent, which I think is more than you can say for most adults. I love this personal story from one unschooler who talks about the advantage of unschooling, and I'm going to read it. The biggest advantage of unschooling was that it smoothed the transition to adulthood instead of all of a sudden being thrown out into the real world of college or career at age 18. I was able to begin exploring these things at a young age and at my own pace. At 15, I was able to take a college class because I was interested and see what college was like. At 16, I was able to start working a part-time job and slowly work more and more. I was able to enroll full-time in college in what would have been my senior year of high school. I didn't have to wait. Unschooling gave me the immediate benefit of time and space to explore my interests and ask myself questions such as what type of person am I and who do I want to be, and then work to make those the same. From unschooling comes all different branches. There's not one way to unschool. Some people outdoor school, some people world school by traveling different places, and some people take advantage of unschooling cooperatives and self-directed learning centers, where there's a place, a spot that's outside of the home where one can really just be. One can be themselves, one can really explore their interests, one can do whatever they want to do. Some of the most famous and those you might have heard of in this conference include North Star in Massachusetts, Princeton Cooperative in New Jersey, Natural Creativity Center in Pennsylvania, and Liberated Learners all across the United States. There's also these wonderful public and private school extensions. And as an educator that, again, has one foot in this world of public education and one foot in this world of alternative education, the public and private school extensions are really interesting models to think about. They allow us to reimagine education. They allow us to re-examine what spaces might look like that are more self-directed or self-determined. One idea is the national opt-out movement. We have a lot of teachers and parents gathering together and saying that the quantitative testing and the focus on testing in schools is unfair. And so the national opt-out model is a real model of parents and teachers getting together and saying, you know what, all this outside assessment, all these extrinsic numbers, they're not working for my kid. You have democratic or Sudbury schooling, where it's really just like an unschooled school except for different democratic structures, which are just like living in society. You have the Independence Project at Monument Mountain Regional High School. And this is a project created by Sam Levin, and he was a student at the high school. And, he was going about his day, grades, 9 to 12, it's tough going. He's going about his day and he's just like, I'm not doing anything I love during the day. And so he told his guidance counselor, I'd like something different. I'd like a time and a space where I can do something I love, where I can engage in independent projects. And so his guidance counselor and he created the Independence Project at Monument Mountain Regional High School. And it was a half-day program for a semester where students could engage and go in and work on their own independent, self-directed projects. And it was a real success. It was a time where students learned and really grew from doing that. You have my colleague David Lane, a high school teacher in Massachusetts. And at his previous school, he did what he called, the 1 period a day project. He asked his administrator for just 1 period a day so that students could engage in self-directed projects, self-directed learning. And what he found was that, of course, some students needed that time to sleep. Some students were really taking that period and resting because that's what they needed to do. And he tells a story of one kid who, during that time mourned his dad. His dad had just died. He was grieving, and so he spent some time grieving. And then it was like one day he woke up from that grief and he said, I want to make a surfboard. My dad loves surfing. I want to make a surfboard. And so he did. That was really his project. He, examined how to make a surfboard. He went to surf shops. He really did so much in order to fulfill the mission of making a surfboard. In the end, he didn't make a surfboard. In the end, he made a skimboard. It didn't float like a surfboard. And David asked him, let's talk about this. What'd you do? And he said, I wish that I knew more about flotation. I should have primed it with different chemicals. I feel like, gosh, I made so many mistakes during the process. And David calls this his biggest success story because he reminded him, this is amazing. First of all, the fact that you made a skimboard is amazing. And second of all, the fact that you know what you want to do better next time is incredible. And that was this person's assessment. It was just making the thing, trying out the thing, seeing if the thing worked, and then reflecting. And that's really all we can ask from assessment. Then there's High Tech High School, and High Tech High School is such an interesting open space in California where there are so many different projects. It's a project-based school. Kids work on different projects, and it's been a huge success. So there's different extensions of how unschooling can be seen even in public and private schools. I work in a university, and unschoolers will tell me, and I'll also tell myself, that college is the biggest form of unschooling. You get to take the classes you want in the major you want, and you get to really dive deep in subjects. And that's really what unschoolers love to do. And so, how do we really gain that feeling of self-direction and intrinsic motivation in colleges? Well, we go ahead and, just like my colleague, Dr. Kevin Curry Knight says, you go ahead, you do independent study, you do a lot of independent projects. He does a lot of self-directed Socratic seminars. I have colleagues that will do choose your own adventure assignments and put it within their syllabus. There are 100 ways in the college and university space that you can be civically and community engaged, just like many unschoolers are. And of course, there are so many opportunities for internships and apprenticeships, the type that Ivan Illich would love. And again, they're really prevalent in the university space. I'm thinking of myself as a professor who gets to spend days doing what I love. I love teaching, and I love also talking about unschooling and alternative learning and the benefits of intrinsically motivated learning. And I think about how lucky I am to have that perspective, and how I want everyone to have that. I want everyone to spend the day as they love, to get to research what they love, to go in depth with what they love. And that's really what unschooling is, right? Unschooling is getting to do what you love at all times of the day. And there isn't a more worthy life than that, right? There's no more we can ask from life than that. I thank you so much for listening to this presentation. Again, my name is Dr. Gina Riley. You can Google me. You'll find a lot of my studies, both with Dr. Peter Gray and independently. And I am the author of Unschooling, Exploring Learning Beyond the Classroom. I really hope you have enjoyed this series of self-directed learning and self-directed learning experts. And I really, really wish you all the very best. If you'd like to go ahead and email me, I can give you references and articles upon request. And I will also do a giveaway. So if you mention the Emergency Home Learning Conference, I will pick names out of a hat, and hopefully someone who contacts me will win a book. So just give me your name and your address, and I will be happy to send you references and articles, and also put your name in my giveaway, where one person from the Emergency Home Learning Conference will win a copy of my new book, Unschooling, Exploring Learning Beyond the Classroom. It's published by Palgrave Macmillan. Thanks again. I wish you all the best. I hope you have a great rest of the Emergency Home Learning Conference, and my good wishes to all of you.